about an amazing new year for the physical therapy profession. Last year, you guys, the people who are attending this type of webinars, are the people who became the survivors, who managed to survive, who managed to thrive in some cases, even in the most adverse conditions. So this year, we want to start this Thursdays, 1 p.m. Coffee with the Hats Personality series with a little different flavor. James, if you share your screen with the strategic planning series. So what we're going to do for the next 7 weeks, called 2021 Strategic Planning Series for Private Practice Owners. This is offered to you by Hands-On Companies and Hands-On Diagnostics. We are going to be presenting this at 1 p.m. every Thursday, Eastern time. And the topics of this, today, we're going to be talking about staffing, acquisitions of staff, how to attract and retain the best staff. On the 14th, we're going to talk about budgeting and finances. Then on the 21st, maximizing your billing and overcoming payer cuts. The 28th, enhancing clinical competency, patients, and practice impact. The 4th of February, marketing and how to attract better referrals and 2021 trends. The 11th of February, compliance strategies, the best practices for that. And the 18th, we're going to have even a whole strategy session about private practice exit strategies. So as you can see, pretty much everything that you need to create an amazing strategic plan for the year, we're bringing it to you this year. And we have with us a lot of the strategic HUD's partners, for today's topic, we're going to have with us my very, very good friend, Will Humphreys, who we're going to chat a bit. And of course, James Savas and Craig Ferriera, lots of knowledge in the area of HR. And we're going to be talking quite a bit about this issue for the next hour. So I know, Will, that you have a PowerPoint presentation already, but I want to start with a question which maybe it's covered through your PowerPoint presentation. But let's start from the very, very beginning, which is how do we acquire staff that are really a real talent and someone who's going to make a difference in our private practices? We all have the people who are kind of thinking, okay, it's 9 o'clock, I'm starting. It's 5 o'clock, I'm out. You know, we have these type of people, but how can we acquire the type of people who are not in the 9 to 5 mentality, but the type of people and employees and associates who are thinking on how they can grow within themselves, within the business, and how they can help expand the business and expand themselves through the business?
Love that question. Get ready, boys and girls. It's going to get real really fast. You know, for me, that question is today. And I want, first of all, before we get into the question, and I'm going to answer it, I just want to personally thank Demi for the opportunity to be here, and James and Craig for the chance to just be with you, because I know that this group, you've heard me say this if you've attended any of my previous lectures or workshops, that this is a very special group of people. And that question might be the very top of your priorities above all else, because if you have any other headaches in your company, you can tie at least part of it, if not all of it, to the type of talent that we have on our team. And so let me paint a picture, first of all, to explain how do we get started in this process of attracting those A players. You're going to hear me use this term frequently. I grade players, and this isn't something that I created. As a provider and entrepreneur, I'm a big believer in R&D, which doesn't stand for research and development. It stands for rip off and duplicate. So for me, what I've learned from the greats is that when we look at our teams, we're looking at the exchange between them and the company, right? And we can get to a whole training on that. But ultimately, do they exchange fairly, or are they ripping off, or are they exchanging abundantly, right? And so when we look at someone who exchanges in abundance, we want to call that an A player. And that's what Demi really asked is, Will, how do we find and attract the A players, right? Those who exchange fairly, we're going to call those B players. These are people who are culturally aligned and they produce okay, but you always get the sense that they're just holding back. Maybe they're hitting their numbers and you're not worried about them and they're not actively creating problems frequently, but you're constantly aware of them, right? Let's skip to D players. D players are those who are low value and low production. They don't last. You wouldn't be in this room if you tolerated the D players. I promise you that. The trickiest ones of all are those C players. And C stands for cancer in this case, because C players can be very confusing. They can produce sometimes really well, but oftentimes they're more on that borderline of production. And then culturally, you just feel like, I don't love them, but I don't hate them, but you don't feel clear with them. And what you don't know is oftentimes behind the scenes, they are causing problems and actively, in some cases, very, like Demi said, there's a small percentage, but these who are truly in their heart C players, they're actively destroying your company. So A, B, C, and D, how do we attract the A? How do we identify the C? How do we make those changes? Because today, I want you to be really clear that what we're not talking about today is a 5-step process to attracting A players. It's so much bigger than that, right? So let's just start off with what most physical therapy practice owners do. You may or may not fall into this, and if you do fall into this category, do not feel bad in any way, shape, or form. But we often put attention on recruiting when the need is present. So the typical PT practice owner, man, things are going pretty good, they could be better, and then someone resigns. Okay, let's start recruiting. So we put together an ad that we probably have on file. If you're a current practice owner, you put it out onto maybe Indeed. You might do some other social media things depending on how advanced you are in those tactics. And then you go through a series of interviews as quickly as possible. And as quickly as possible, we bring someone on. And in the short term, life kind of sucks. Excuse the language, but that's just how it is. You're in a position where you're maybe wearing more hats than you're used to doing. You're producing more than you're used to doing. And you just want relief from the pain. And isn't that really how, at least if you're not doing that currently, isn't that typically how at one point we all started in recruiting? Is that we just wanted to be free from the pain of having to work harder than we already do, which is, as you know, impactful both personally, physically, and in your home life because you already work so hard as an owner. So to answer that question, how do we attract? I want to be really clear. We are going to talk about some tactics, and I want this to be workshop format. I want to hear from you. I want to hear questions from you. I want to hear best practices from you. I don't have all the answers. I will tell you that when I coach, which I coach monthly, anywhere between 5 and 10 people, the number one topic we talk about is this. And as the vice president of recruiting and talent acquisition for a company with 40 locations, and it was me and an assistant, I do have some valuable information to share with you. But remember that the human part of our business is best expressed in the talent acquisition. And you can hear me already using different phrases. I started with recruiting, and listen to how I'm talking. Talent acquisition. That's what you're doing. We're not hiring staff. Staff is an infection. We're hiring team members, right? So typically with recruiting, the first place when someone comes to me, and Demi, I'm just going off I'm answering this question. Answering that question is today's presentation. So I don't know if you were wanting more of a concise answer around that, but I'm getting into that. But I just want to make sure you can jump. You're jumping in whenever you need to. Or
no, this is cool. This is cool.
Okay. So I think I am going to jump over to the PowerPoint because we're going to talk about how do we attract the A players. So am I able to share my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So while I'm pulling this PowerPoint up, I want to ask a question to the group, and I want you to put your answers in the chat. If you don't know how to use Zoom chat, that's okay. I'm sure most of you do by now. In 2020, we all got a major training on how to use Zoom, right? So go into your chat and answer this question for me if it aligns for you. How vital is our personal leadership in developing a team of A players? Why is it important? What's the relationship? Like, answer it from any angle, but what is the correlation between a strong leader and being able to attract A talent? So be answering that while I pull up this presentation.
And or unmute your mic, and you're more than welcome to share it and shout out loud about that.
Yes.
And it's interesting, Will, that you are bringing this up because just last night, I was attending a presentation like this, and the topic, one of the items that were discussed was how leadership and direction is very important for a project to get done by whoever you assign the project to.
Yes.
Because sometimes we say, okay, you guys take this project, but without giving to them like some direction, without exercising leadership, they may be lost. They may not know how to handle it. So, but anyway, I think you want to share your screen.
I do. I appreciate that comment, by the way, because it really emphasizes it gives mass and understanding around a specific example of the difference between leadership and not leadership within a delegated environment. So, for example, if I say, hey, go see a bunch of physical therapy patients versus, all right, so our win-win agreement is that you're going to see 1.5 patients per hour, bill 4 skilled units, have a percentage of arrival at 80% or greater, or whatever your statistics are. And I need that done by the end of this week. Does that work for you? Right? There's an alignment. That's the difference between delegating and dumping. Dumping and delegating are greatly defined by the information, education, and deadlines set. So I'm going to show a video here to start that I'm super excited about. This video, I think you guys are going to get a real kick. It's just a couple of minutes, but it really highlights, it's going to build into the answer of that question. What's the correlation between a strong leader and developing and attracting A talent? But first, let's take a look at the different types of A, B, C, and D players from a different perspective. I want you to see this cartoon for a couple of minutes, and don't get wrapped up in the terms if they're new to you. There's some words to describe these types of people. Be more attentive to the way it feels from your previous experience. Okay, pay attention. I don't know if this company even exists, but I love this video. Watch this last part. Okay, let's go to some of the answers if anyone typed anything. Oh, here we go. Renee, thank you. Renee says extremely important. Training is essential and should be ongoing to bring staff along. It's 1,000% vital for personal development, says James. You said it. A phrase that I love that I've heard multiple times is pace of the leader, pace of the pack. So oftentimes, Jose says it's never ending. It's so true. And the question I have for Jose's comment to all of you is, have you created a company and are you the leader that's going to attract that A talent? And that question is meant to sting just a little bit because we are already so hard on ourselves. And I would tell you that so much when I coach people, what I find is that they're already super powerful leaders. They're just needing to continue in their development. And we're going to talk about that briefly because that could be a whole different presentation on personal development. But we have to start there. Where does recruiting start? It starts with you as a leader, right? Dini says training equals control. Control equals income. And you as the leader, starting with your own personal training and development, set the pace for what you value in your company and therefore will greatly impact who you bring on. When I coach, oftentimes people are looking for a recipe. Hey, Will, can you create an ad for me? Hey, Will, can you do some interviews? What interview questions do you ask? Like, how do you do that? We get so wrapped up in the how that we forget about the who. Who are we? Who are we needing to be? Are we being someone who's reacting, to a need in recruiting, or are we someone who, as a leader, can foresee change and plans for it? Because control equals income. I've got one more leadership piece, and obviously we're spending some significant time, but it's important to me that we get this piece clear. In the PowerPoint I'm pulling up right now, I want you guys to see this phrase right here. If you have the wrong people, it doesn't matter. If you discover the right direction, you still won't have a great company. Great vision without great people is irrelevant. How are the people on your team? So we first look at the leader, then we look at the existing team. And we're going to talk about that here. But Robert says, a leader helps set expectations, culture of a company. Robert, yes. The CEO is also the CCO, the Chief Cultural Officer of a company. They set the experience up through example. Our frustrations are often a function of an expectation. Leadership brings clarity. Oh, Robert, what a wonderful share. At the end of the day, how much are we spending our time managing expectations? Do we do our monthly or yearly reviews, or however we do our review system, in a place of like, man, I just want to get through it, hope they don't say something one way or another? Or are we have the intention, are we clear with the intention as to what we want to create individually and with the team every time we sit down? So all great leaders understand this concept. It's always first who, then what. This is the biggest mistake we make in recruiting, is that we come up with a strategic plan based around the what we want, not the who we want to do it with. Now, there is this concept called be, do, have. You start developing your idea of the future with what you want to have. And that's kind of a what. But tactically, we have to have a greater emphasis on the who that we're building with us. The person who came up with this quote is a guy by the name of Jim Collins. He wrote a book called Good to Great, Built to Last. If you're not familiar with who this individual is, he is a massive researcher who spent decades learning and studying the most successful companies. Why are they great when others fail or stay good? And he has learned that all successful companies have a couple things in common. The first thing is that they focus on leadership first before they do anything else. Second is that they focus on their team versus what they want to build as their primary aspect of that. So in this picture, who in this pack of wolves is the leader? That's exactly right. Most people, and the reason I bring this exactly, Jose, watching the pack, is that most of the time, this is how we perceive leadership, as being at the front of the group, leading the way, hedging. What we have to remember as leaders, it's not our job to get the job done. And being an executive, by definition, is being someone who gets others to get the job done. But we get so confused in this concept, we put ourselves at the front line of our business. I have nothing against PT owners treating. Absolutely nothing. As a matter of fact, depending on your size and your vision and your purpose, that might be exactly where you are. I will tell you, however, that so many times I find leaders who are so busy treating that they are unable to spend time working on their company and being in the back of the group, protecting it from attacks. Yeah, I'm going to see if I can go forward here. That leader is here, and guess who's closest to that leader? And this front group is actually the oldest wolves in the group, the most susceptible for damage. They set the pace because they understand that concept of your chain is only as strong as your weakest link. So they let them set the pace so that they're not vulnerable as a group to attack. The yellow group and the group right in front of the leader are the strongest wolves in the pack. They are the admin team. Those are those individuals in charge of helping people move along. If we are carrying recruiting on our own shoulders, it becomes exponentially more difficult. If we're treating constantly, it becomes exponentially more difficult. We have to recognize and give ourselves space to wear the different hats that we are meant to wear as entrepreneurs. Only then in that space can we put the right attention on the different activities that promote survival, recruiting being the most important. If you walk away with one thing today as like, what can I do to build my team? It's to simply start building it daily. Like, that's the simplest thing I can say that has the greatest impact from today. If you want to retain and attract, you have to just work on it daily. And we're going to go into different ways you can do that here and places you can get help and some tactics. But man, like, if I gave you a bunch of questions of like the best questions you can ask in an interview, how small is that compared to just knowing that every day, ABC or ABR, always be recruiting, always be acquiring talent. It's especially important that we put this piece in. And how important is recruiting or talent acquisition? It's vital. It's everything. I love this. Don sent me a direct message, but I have to share it. Having the wrong wolves in the front of the company pack could be determining to the company if the wrong pace is set. That's true. And that is a different piece between this analogy that we're going through and there, because in this case, these are the C players of our company. We wouldn't want to even have these wolves involved. In our company, this would be the leadership of the pack right there. So Jim Collins talks about level 5 leadership. Level 5 leadership is someone who follows a couple of different traits. They focus on excellence. We're not going to get into it completely, but they have determination to do what's right. They prioritize their company's needs over their self needs. They give credit to everyone when things go right, and they take responsibility every time something goes off the rails a little bit. They focus on who before what. So I didn't want to make this completely about how to become a leader, but I had to mention that as the first important thing to talk about. Is that how do we become a level 5 leader? Well, it's determined by this. Who we are in 5 years is greatly determined by who we associate with and what books we read. That's the greatest way to develop our leadership, is through books and through training with those who are leaders. Are we spending time reading books and studying companies and becoming the next Steve Jobs? Or are we spending our weekends watching reality TV and becoming more like the Kardashians? That's determined by the time we spend on what we read. So my top 2 suggestions are to first, always look at coaching. Coaching is a vital piece. And I am so excited that Craig Ferriera is here from Survival Strategies. He is a influencer and a proven leader through his company to help provide this type of help. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's been figured out by many people beforehand. And so that the information that his company can share, and I get nothing for sharing any of this. I'm not trying to promote anything other than just solution. If you're not even sure, if you're like, I coach a guy today who he told me, yeah, I think coaching's a bunch of crap, but I had to work with you because I'm just desperate for change. And what he was really saying was the pain of not changing has exceeded the pain of change. And he wants to do anything he can about it. So coaching is an incredibly useful way to do that. There's organizations out there. And then I'm going to send out a book list for anyone who wants it of the top books that I've learned over the last 15 years in topical order as to why it's important. There's books on how to recruit and get into the weeds a lot more around these things. But at the end of the day, we have to remember our team, our company, and us as leaders have to be the type of person that are going to attract those A players. Going back to A players, let me see here. Oh, this is it. So this is the first thing you do in talent acquisition. You don't start by putting ads out. You start by assessing yourself first and then your team. And this is the PT team assessment tool. All right. To walk through it quickly, man, time goes so fast on these things. A players, B players, D players, and C players. You have production at the bottom, ranging from low production on the left to high production on the right. So the arrow that you can't see goes like this. And this is a worksheet I've created for anyone who wants it. It helped me a ton to create this when my first companies were young, and start plotting who is where. Values are people who are bought into your culture. You know who those people are. They're the people that give you warm fuzzies. They're the people that like you feel like they actually like you and they're not trying to get something from you. So highly value aligned people and highly productive people are your A players. So we're going to talk a little bit at the end here how you retain those people, because man, retention with A players is key to creating a business that absolutely runs without you. B players, again, they're high value and they're producing okay, but sometimes they need help getting their production up. D players, low value, low production. C players, the cancer. They can produce sometimes well, but oftentimes are so low on values and hiding it that they can cause problems. Remember the guy standing on the wheel? There's that guy pulling back on it. Oh man, that's like over here. So once you have an assessment of your team, and that's a subjective experience, you're going to put people down. I'm going to go back. You can put people however you want on that graph. You have one last step that's incredibly important for you to ask, and you have to be 100% honest. You look at each person where they are on the graph, and you ask yourself, would I emphatically rehire that person to do what they're currently doing? The key word being emphatically. Not, yeah, no, they're doing good. They're getting better. You know what? They've made progress. No. Black and white, yes or no. Would you emphatically rehire each person on your team? Because here's why that's important. I want you to go back to that cartoon with the wagon. Do you think an A player isn't going to notice the guy standing on the wheel? The guy at the front, the leader, the producer, which is what all of you are, right? You're rainmakers of business. You're so busy pushing forward, you can't always look over your shoulder to see what's going on there, but A players have the space and time to see it. A players always know who the C players are. And that's why they leave. C players are the number one reason why we don't retain. So isn't that funny? We talk about retention and like compensation and like ownership and all these things. No, create an amazing team where they feel like they're going to a family environment and they won't leave as long as the compensation is at least fairly exchanged. Because the exchange in abundance from you as an owner to these team members is to create an experience like they don't have to work, but they get to fulfill their personal purpose and passion. None of that can happen when the C, D, and B players are running the company. And so when you look over your shoulder and you see those people, you have to handle those things first to attract and retain those people. So what happens if you say no? I wouldn't emphatically hire half my team. Don't stress. There's actually one thing we do with everybody to make them an A player. We coach people up and or out of our company. If I have a B player over here, I need to coach them into becoming an A. If I have a C player, usually best just to fire them yesterday. Like yesterday. If you have a known C player, and I know there's someone in this space, there's a lot of you out there. There is someone right now who knows that the only reason a person is on their team is that they don't know how to confront it. Either because they're worried about the damage they're going to create on the way out by talking crap about you in the company to the other B and C and A players, or you're terrified of the extra workload that you're going to have to accrue because they're still on the team. You know, if they leave the team, you have to take all that work on, or maybe it's a combination of both. But I have learned this one rule. It's like gravity. It's that true to me. Is that when you just act and get it done and cut the cancer out as quickly as possible, stats improve, morale goes up. The A players are like, I respect this person. They're not tolerating this crap any longer. And then you get this buy-in. I'm sure all of us have experienced it on some level, but it has to be highly dialed in as a company in order to attract and then retain these amazing people by first answering that question. For those of you who are like, hey, how do I coach people up? Maybe they're not C players, maybe they're a B player, and you love them, they love the company, but they're just not, they're always requiring more help than you'd like to give them. That's where I'd reach out to the coaches of this world and ask for help. I would tell you that part of your coaching, you know, and learning and the people that you're with, you're doing it now by being in the best physical therapy network in the world, in my opinion. And again, I'm not getting paid to say that. You know, you can work with Craig Ferriera and his team. You can work with Demi and this team here with James. You've got people that you can reach out to. I would be happy to answer any questions anytime at no charge to just like help you guys figure these pieces out. So use your resources and like make this team a team of A players. All right. So moving on and being efficient with my time. The next piece, we're going to be talking about your foundation of your company. So we first talked about how to recruit and retain people was first by developing you as a leader, keeping your emphasis on that. The second thing was going right into your team assessment around like, all right, who needs help? How can we make this better so that when we do bring someone else on, we're not just putting water into a vase with a hole in it, but we are putting someone into a vessel that's complete, or at least in process of becoming complete. This is something that's incredibly important. Being able to articulate clearly your company's purpose, values, and vision is the secret sauce when I work with people on a tactical level. So assuming you're in progress as a leader, assuming you've done your team assessment, and you're doing all that can be done around improving the team that's pushing the cart, then it becomes a matter of just being clear as to why you exist, what you value, and where you're going. Because what we're talking about with purpose, vision, values, and by the way, people who are new in business or they've been in business, but they've been stuck, they almost always look at this as like not that important. Like they get that it's important, but they don't understand like clarity on your foundation is literally the difference between you owning a job versus you owning an actual company that can sustain itself without you. I do believe I got a comment. Pull that up. Oh yeah, I love that. I'm going to reiterate what he says. As you are listening to the presentation, type here 3 actions you're going to include in your HR strategic plan for 2021. And I would like to encourage you, if you've never done a team analysis, that would be something. I'm going to give you the workshop. We just did a mini training on that. That could be one of your actions, is to assess your current team situation, right? The next piece after that is establishing your purpose, vision, values. This takes some work with someone like a coach or an organization, but that's what I do that's different. When I do work with people and I help them recruit, what I do is I help them just articulate their purpose, vision, and values, and everyone has one. And the biggest mistake I see is either thinking that it's not that important to create it, or because they just don't understand why it's important, or they like don't think they have a powerful enough purpose. They're like, I don't really know why I became a PT owner. I wanted more money, and I kind of wanted more vacation time. It's like, yeah, of course you wanted that stuff. But why are you successful enough to be in this room? If you were focused on money as your primary driver, I promise you, you wouldn't have the space or time to work on developing yourself as a leader, a level 5 leader, to be in this room. There's an emotionally charged reason, a purpose. In my case, I'm a highly spiritual person. Like, I believe there's callings in life, right? And I believe everyone has one, and one's not better or worse than another. And the more we can define those things that give us energy, the more we can clearly articulate where we're going and why we exist, the more we will attract people like us. We'll attract those A players. And that's why they don't leave, because they know from being an A player, they typically get dumped on. A players in other companies, maybe you've experienced this, they typically just handle all the grunt work because the employer knows they can handle it. And maybe you're doing that with one of your people now, I don't know. When leaders don't know how to lead, they usually dump on their A players. But an A player in an environment that appreciates them will always stay. And we use those terms in the job ad. We use that phrasing in the interview. We make sure we emphasize that in the working interview. We promote it in every monthly meeting. And we use those terms when we fire. John, it's not working out. Here we're all about integrity. And multiple times I've noticed that what you say and what you do are different. That's why we're letting you go. So purpose, vision, values, using that as the secret weapon into developing your ads, your style. And like we talked about, if you're not at level 5 leadership and putting constant attention on your recruiting efforts, without a doubt, you're only going to be throwing those things out there when you have to have them. How desperate is that? Like, think about dating. Did you ever have someone in a romantic relationship that was just so much more into you than you were into them? I actually don't know if I've ever had that. I think I was the guy that was always like super into the girl. But here's the thing, is that like there's like this human nature aspect of the dance, right? Of like, even if you think the other person's beautiful and smart and all these things, if that person is like, oh, but I want to be with you every second, and I want you to come be, I want you to marry me. It's just this natural, like, no. And when we recruit only when there's a need, that's the attitude with which we bring. Think about recruiting. If you could have a line of A players, if you knew how to magically create a bench of A players, how different you would interact with your team when they have complaints and concerns and they're kicking back against the new programs that you're implementing. You'd probably have this confidence of like, okay, well, if it's not working out for you to do this, then maybe you should work somewhere else, because John over there is ready to join the team. That is always the goal. The product of a successful retention and recruiting division of a company is a bench of A players waiting to join your company. And we have all sorts of excuses why that's not possible in physical therapy. Oh, it's hard to recruit, especially before COVID. I work in rural areas. I'm in Alaska. I can't do that. I can't, we have all these excuses that come up with. Listen, I have been able to do it. And I've always said, if I can do it, anyone can do it. Because all we have to do is apply some of these techniques that we're talking about. Recruiting every day, being clear in our messaging, being super clear as to what the team value is. Remember, always in the recruiting process, when you do bring candidates in, to involve as many team members as possible. This is bleeding from talent acquisition into retention. When we are bringing on a person, you don't want to bring in everybody from the company. Like if you're hiring a director of physical therapy, you don't want them to have a one-on-one with your tech. And like, thumbs up, what do you think? No, but you want to involve as many people that are relatively influenced as possible. So if you're bringing on a physical therapist, make sure the CEO, make sure the director, make sure sometimes the other PTs, if you think they're A players, if you have an A clinic and a rock star clinic, sometimes it's a group interview. Check references and backgrounds always. Seriously, like you can find the C players, those really dangerous people, we call them suppressive people in other terminology. They're so good at lying. Man, you'll think you have an A player every time. They come in, they love, oh, you're so smart, Will. And can I say just a little bit handsome? Like, sure, buddy, where do you want to start working in the company? And the background, it's like, I can tell you story after story about the C players I've had. I have 3 examples that are just like, they literally gave me health issues. Literally told by a doctor I needed a pacemaker because I didn't know this guy was in the background causing me problems until I discovered it with coaching. But ultimately, yeah, like you can find some of these C players by just checking references and backgrounds. And we can get into how to do that in another seminar. Always do a working interview with whoever you bring in. This is like something that I can't emphasize enough. Many of you probably do this by now, but if you don't, please bring in whoever you're hiring, have them spend 2-3 hours at no cost to just shadow someone who's already an A player or your best player in that position, and have them teach them a couple of basic things, see how they learn, how they duplicate. Tell them this is your way of giving them your references, so that when they are wondering about the job and maybe they're an A player who they're wanted by multiple avenues, that's their way to get more reality around what it would be like to work there. And it makes you stand out. I didn't put this in the PowerPoint, but something I always tell my PTs is I tell them, and I do this more for me than for them, I tell them I won't hire them unless they've interviewed 2 other places. So why do I do it for me? Because it keeps me from getting super desperate. It lets me be a little detached from it. But what I've learned over time, and I've learned this from some of my A players, is that it really shows them that what I really care about is the best fit for them. And man, is that attractive. Going back to that dating analogy, an attractive person is like, listen, I think you're amazing. I would love to marry you. Just want to make sure this is what you want. Because I don't want to be 5 years into a marriage that doesn't work. So if you're not even sure, let's not keep talking about it. It's a little bit of that. So as PTs have done that, I've never had someone go do a second interview and leave. I've had multiple times they tell me that was a deciding factor to work with me, was that I was so invested in them. And I will tell them this. These are 2 things I've been told when I've hired PTs that they say are linchpins. And you have to mean it. You can't just say it, you have to mean it. But one of the things I'll say is, hey, look, my job is to make sure you get your next job, whether it's with me or somebody else, because I'm here to serve you. My function as the CEO is to help you tap into your potential and grow. And sometimes that means it's not here at my company, but I'm really invested in you as a person. All right. So that kind of goes to this last piece here about what you should always, here's just like overall like guiding principles in the talent acquisition phases. We hire slow and you fire fast, right? You've heard that before, hire slow, fire fast. But that doesn't mean you communicate slowly. Marketing and sales is about touches. A touch can be a text, it can be an email, it can be a phone call, it can be a literal pat on the back. But remember, you hire slowly. You want to make sure that it's not a perfect, but a good fit before you bring them on board by going through the different stages of interviews. But you communicate like it's your biggest priority, because it is. Going back to that cartoon. What is that guy's who's pushing the cart's biggest priority? Is it to get stronger himself to where he doesn't need others, or is it to get stronger in being able to find and keep the other strong players on the team? You do that by showing them they matter through frequent communication, not waiting until the end of the day when your patients are done. The second they text, I stop whatever I'm doing and I get to it. The only communication more important than a recruiting communication piece for me is my children and wife. Because I've learned from experience that that's what you do to show the A players they're valuable in the early stages. Remember, dating is like the talent acquisition in early stages of recruiting. They're getting a sense of what it would be like to be with you. And if our communication isn't just good, but great, they don't really understand what it is that you could do for them. All right. And I will tell you this as a small sidestep is that every hire, I teach them how to quit and or how we fire. So the first day we sit down, I go, okay, welcome to the company. Let's talk about what happens when you need to quit. What? Yeah, we're talking about, because ultimately A players even will leave weakly and unpowerfully when they don't know how to do it. It's our job to train and to keep them into that methodology of what works for us. If we tell them, yeah, I'd like to know the second you're not happy, that's how you retain. It's like, listen, so if you're ready to quit, this is how it starts. The second you're not feeling like this is a great fit for you, I want you to let me know so that we can work with you. And if it turns out it's not a fit, then we can give each other plenty of time for you to find your replacement before you move on. I'll even call companies to help you find work if you just tell me early enough. This is actually a retention strategy, is by training them how to quit. People don't know what to do when they're unhappy. There's a C player in the organization. We don't know who that C player is. And so what do? They feel unhappy. And what happened, this isn't universal. A players on a Saturday are just kind of like, yeah, I've kind of had it with Will. And they go into Indeed and they just look for a job innocently. They just want to see what's out there. They're just doing research to satisfy that discomfort. And wouldn't you know it, there's a job closer to my house? Huh. Well, I'll just send him a resume. That's all I'm going to do. Right? And most of the time, the thing that's having them look is something we can resolve if we just knew. So by getting ahead of that in the interviewing process and in the early hiring training stages, by teaching them, yeah, look, it's going to be hard here sometimes. It's going to be okay. But when hard turns into desires to leave on any level, I want you to let me know, because you matter to me. Remember, I'm not going to try to keep you. I'm going to try to help you find your best job, your next best job. And if it's with me, I want every shot to be successful at that. And I can't do that if I don't know you're not happy and you're starting to look elsewhere. So before you start looking elsewhere, even innocently, let me know. All right, guys. I think that is it for the slideshow.
I would like to ask 2 questions before I go, and I'm going to ask them. One is for James and one is for Craig. Craig, you have only 5 minutes before you have to go also. So my question to you is—
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay. What are the top 3 minutes, the top 3 characteristics that from your viewpoint, a productive staff member has? And for you, James, talk to us about retaining a talent. What you can do to retain a talent in your business.
Go ahead, Craig.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, I wanted to also give something else. So how do you identify the top person, the qualities? Was that the question?
Yes.
The qualities of a top person? It's quite simple. Do they understand, do they agree with, and do they actually apply helping you and them achieve the goals that you've established for whatever it is you're doing? If they're pushing and doing that for you and with you, that's cool. If they're just money motivated, forget it. But just so you know, I've told clients for years, if you're in a hiring interview and the first thing that comes out, what's the paycheck going to be? Sorry, that's not what we're looking for. But the one thing I wanted to say that backs up everything you've done here is only one thing. First of all, you got to create an A-class clinic, okay? And to brand your clinic to hire, you should interview your A-class staff and get them on video. Get a video clip of your A staff on video. What's it like to work here? It's great PR, and you use that for your social media. You put it on your website. Somebody wants to know what your place does. Instead of you telling them, because you're going to have your viewpoint, say, look, I'd rather have you listen to one of my staff here. It's called PR, by the way, public relations. Good works well publicized, right? That's in the public relations book. Guys, I unfortunately have 30 seconds left. I don't know if that helped. Go to James. I hope to see you again later, and have a great day.
Make
I
sure
wish I
you
could
reach
spend
out to
more time with
Craig.
you.
I can't recommend him enough. If
Hi.
you have any questions and you don't already work with Craig.
Thanks, Craig.
Totally awesome. Survival Strategies is the company. Have a great one. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Craig. Sure, I'll answer Demi's question here. Well, I love listening to you talk, man. You're engaging. The data you share. No one, I don't know. I know few people that can roll like you do on this stuff. So thank you again, just for having your time here and sharing all that. Of course, buddy. Anytime. He asked me about retention, and guys, we can have this call. Me and Will have played with this idea every week. We could hit HR from one of 20 different angles: retention, hiring, advertising. Forget about it. PR, firing. So my question to me was about retaining staff. All I'm going to say that dovetails what Will said is an executive's job and a manager's job, owner's job is on their feet. It's not at a desk doing admin. I mean, of course, there's admin to do always. You're going to have to work on your planning and that kind of stuff. But an executive's job is on their feet, observing and evaluating and communicating. And that's what I think all of what we're talking about, the culture building and all of that comes from, and retention, in my opinion, from what I've seen and done, is when the owner, the boss, or the executive in a really big company is on their feet, observing what's going on, asking how it's going, observing problems, seeing that person come in late, all of that stuff. Because when they see that and they interact with the staff on that, you're going to spot the people that are engaging with you, right? You're going to spot the clinical employee that's, hey, boss, how's it going? Not the one that's backing off and hiding in the corner when you come to see them, right? So you'll have, if you're not on your feet doing that, and I would see everybody, I would take time every week or more often than that, get up and go see every employee you have. But if you don't do that, then you won't know what's going on. And if you're going to rely only on your managers to do it, then good luck. If they're all A players, maybe you're okay. But there's no guarantee even then, right? So that's one thing I would say is if you're there observing and you're aware of what's going on, staff will see that. And like Will said, you might catch them on the computer looking at it, at the resume. Who knows? But if you're not there and you're just in an ivory tower sitting there doing your boss stuff, you know what happens as an employee myself? You know what happens when I'm an employee and the boss is always in a closed door meeting and they never really come out of that space? You don't know what you think. They're just money motivated schmucks, those bosses, as an employee. So get up, get involved, ask questions, observe, pull them aside one-on-one, So anyway, that's a quick tip, but I think amazingly valuable. That's what I got for you guys.
Thank you, James. That was amazing. And so guys, as Demi said, what's your 3 steps you're going to do? I would love to hear about those somewhere in an email. I don't know. I would just love to hear about it. So if you're attending next week, maybe throw that in the chat. I'll be in here next week, even though I'm not speaking, and I'd be monitoring to see what you guys are working on.
Cool. Thank you all very much for coming on. Same time, same place every week, different events. And you got the link down there. Thanks again, Will.
Thank you, James.